kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no kwa, Osinachi. One lemon, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. I'm no kwa, Osinachi. One lemon, Osinachi. I'm watching. Daily, Osinachi. Mama, Osinachi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
Fine.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Jimo. Apparently, I'm the chair of this panel.
I can see that, sir.
I would like to welcome everybody. I think we are all set.
I think so.
Okay. Yolanda Osondu, are you with us?
Yes, sir, I am.
Oh, good afternoon, madam. How are you?
I'm fine. Good afternoon, sir.
We are waiting for Bamidele Ali. Mr. Lukman or Dr. Lukman Adeniyi. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. You are welcome to this today's session. Nigeria history, colonial and post-colonial history. Going by the calendar here, we have three presenters. We have Bamidele Ali. Is she with us? She's not online. Then we have Kausara Okpayemi from University of Ibadan and Lukman Adeniyi, an independent scholar. Do we have Kausara Okpayemi online?
I don't think so, but look.
But we have Lukman Adeniyi. Hello? Then we have Yolanda Osondu. Hello, Yolanda.
I can hear you very clearly, sir.
Okay, good. I think without much ado, we can actually proceed because Bamidele is not, apparently she's not online. The panel is all about the post-colonial and colonial Nigeria. I think our first presenter will be talking about business survival woes, colonial and post-colonial businesses in Nigeria. Without wasting much of our time, I will call on Lukman Adeniyi to please proceed.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone.
We can all hear you.
Okay. Can you see me as I'm speaking, sir?
We can't see you, but you can hear your voice.
I think you should be able to see me too as I'm talking.
Well, we are not seeing you.
Probably I don't know how to do that on my phone here because I've been trying to make myself visual, but it has not been working. So far you can hear me. I think I can continue with this presentation, sir.
All right. You have 15 minutes, please.
I have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Yes.
The topic of this paper is focusing on business survival woes and assessment of colonial and post-colonial businesses in Nigeria. On a normal ground, it is a kind of work in progress. We're still working on it. The other co-participants should be the one to present this particular paper. But since it's not here with us, I will take the privilege to present it. Now, it is a kind of work in progress, and it is in the process of working on this paper that we discover that the scope of the something is wider than what we can actually exhaust in this paper. Instead of looking at the business survival woes in the whole of in the whole of colonial and post-colonial era in Nigeria, we ought to have streamlined the scope of the paper to southwestern Nigeria. It was when we started working on colonial papers that we discovered that we even have more than enough to work with in colonial period, not to talk of post-colonial time. Are you with me, sir? Are you with me, sir?
Please proceed. We are with you.
Now,
Proceed.
so can I quickly take the abstract of the paper? The purpose of this paper is to look at the impact of colonial and post-colonial governance on business survival in Nigeria. Colonial activities and post-colonial alike generally had attracted scholarly attention in the past years. It seems that the travails of business survival of indigenous businesses have not been historicized to large extent. The colonial epoch was a watershed in the history of the country. It is arguably undeniable that Nigeria profited almost nothing economically from the dispensation. The so-called benefit of colonialism are the seeds of backwardness and underdevelopment that's transparent in the present day life of the country. It has been unanimously agreed by renowned economic historians that colonial rule was not a benevolent political system. The sources of this paper were from primary and secondary data. The primary data came from colonial provision and divisional papers deposited in the National Archives, University of Ibadan. The paper is also enriched by extant literature on colonial and post-colonial economic and business activities in Nigeria. The authors the authors seek to expand on how colonialism tapped enormously from huge opportunities provided by their business empire to relegate indigenous businesses in a bid to foster their colonial ambition. They unearth the process by which the successive government continue to ensure the realization of colonial goal in neocolonialism and neoliberalism by extirpating local businesses and forcing established ones into relocation or extinction. The authors intend to elaborate on the intention of local bourgeoisie trained by colonial agents to integrate local economy deeply into Western capitalist system to flourish Western economy and sink domestic economy into oblivion. Through this process, they enrich themselves and Nigeria's businesses only promote foreign-made goods, and the country becomes everlasting dumping ground. Now, like I said in the earlier on, that the paper is still a kind of work in progress. So, and we've realized that the scope of that particular of the paper is so expansive that we cannot exhaust everything here now. So the authors have tried to look at the reasons behind why businesses have not been able to survive in colonial Nigeria. So now, why is it, the question is, why is it that despite the fact that during the colonial time, the colonial masters, they established one or two businesses in Nigeria during that particular time, and some indigenous business also were equally growing? Why is it that during that particular time, the colonial businesses did not pay grant for the local, or let me say indigenous businesses to thrive? And why is it that the few indigenous businesses that actually survived the colonial time were unable to survive in the post-colonial era? So this work is trying to establish something that is business history, to extract business history from economic history, because so far it has been discovered that the excellent literatures on colonial activities in Nigeria centered majorly on economic activities. Now, this particular, and when the excellent literatures excellent literature explore the these colonial economic activities, it seems that they only focus on how the colonial economy relegated the economy of the colony. And why is it that the colonial government only, made the colony, the sources of raw materials to support the, the process of industrialization going on in Europe during that particular time. So this particular work is trying to emphasize the need to look at the business history. And since it is a kind of work in progress, we're still looking at how we can actually extract business history from economic history. Now, in the works of a scholar so far on colonialism in Nigeria, so we realize that some of them have worked on the contributions of media to the colonization process, but we have not seen in any document or in any writings how the businesses also supported the decolonization process. Now, I think during the colonial time, banks will be established. So during that particular time, what were the functions of the banks established, and how did this bank contribute to the economic development of the colony? And how the businesses during that particular time actually, competed, if not favorably, with the colonial businesses. How exactly were they able to survive the torment of that particular time? So now we now bring out two major arguments in this particular paper. Number one, that the excellent literature on colonial economic activities with regard to their gruesome impact on the economic development of Nigeria did not address business history in Nigeria at all. It is a form of, and this work is a form of micro-history that wishes to correct the notion that business history cannot be separated from economic history, although business history will continue to be like a kind of a stepchild of economic history. Both areas are interrelated indeed, but this work will reveal that business history can actually stand on its own. The work makes two major arguments. Like I said, first, it shows how colonial business served as a catalyst of growth and development of business as an institution in Nigeria. Though this particular institution could not survive seriously in the colonial time, and few ones that survived in the colonial time happened to go into extinction shortly after the colonial whatever. Only the businesses that survived during that particular time were only able to support the growth of colonial economy triggered by the Industrial Revolution at the detriment of the colonized people. The second argument is that colonial subjects benefited hugely from this particular relationship by working in companies powered by colonial government to aid their imperial target, which was exploitation. However, businesses were growing in the colony due to friendly atmosphere. The progress was strangulated through neocolonialism aggravated by obnoxious and damaging policies on the part of government, which eventually forced some of these businesses into relocation, while others into extinction. So we just want the co-participant here to help us in whatever ways that this particular paper can be enriched better. How exactly we can discuss business history as independent of economic history, and how we can actually channel the establishment of companies during the colonial time in such a way that it will reveal how they actually contributed to the decolonization process, and why is it that after the colonial time, after the colonial government had left, after the independence of the country, why is it that these businesses were unable to survive? Because it has been noted that it was because of the colonial colonial pressure, the pressure exerted by the colonial government on the indigenous businesses that did not make them thrive during the colonial time. Why is it that after the colonial government had left, these businesses still found it, absolutely uneasy to survive? Yes, sir.
I think your time is up. You have like 1 minute to round off, please.
So, like I said, what I want these, the panelists and the co-participants to do for us in this particular paper is to actually help us with ideas that can actually enrich the paper, and how we can actually separate business history from economic history. That is all, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. I think we have about 8 attendees. Some of them might be able to help your paper, trying to fashion out what the paper should actually look like. Because to me, as it is now, it seems you are testing hypothesis. Having said that, now I think we have Bamidele Ali with us, who's supposed to present first. But right now, I think we should allow her to present her paper while Yolanda take her place thereafter. Bamidele Ali, please.
Can I share my screen? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can I share my screen?
Good, yes.
Because I have some slides, because it will be easier basically to follow the slides. So, so I presented this paper a long time ago at the University of Ibadan, and I'm going to present it again next month at the Congress, at the World Economic History Congress. So
Sorry, Bamdele, can you be more audible?
Hello?
Can you
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, but you can actually raise your voice a bit.
Okay,
louder.
Yeah, I need to get closer to the computer. So basically, I had the idea for this paper a long time ago as well, when I bumped into the speech of Brigadier Robert Adeyinka Adebayo, who was the military governor of Western state of Nigeria. And in this speech, he's talking about budget, program, and policy for the year 1968 and 1969. So basically, I'm going to talk about the tax riots of 1968, 1969 in southwestern Nigeria. So let me open my Word document. So 1968 was the year of the protest across the world. In Nigeria, Nigeria was dealing with a civil war with Biafra, a secessionist region in the southeast of the federation, and it was also facing some violent process in southwestern Nigeria. Whose cocoa production was a strong cash crop. Indeed, during the Nigerian civil war, many taxpayers in the southwestern region of Nigeria refused to pay the due tax. Not paying tax had major implications for the Nigerian government, which had to fund a costly civil war, had reduced revenue from the oil and agricultural sector. It is also important to note that the Nigerian Federal Military Government, FMG, lost revenues as well through demonetization operation in Nigeria, the secessionist region, and internationally. According to the new monetary theory by Ray, Money is created to generate revenues from seigneuriage and above all from taxation. Thus, this right could have spread across the country and had serious economic implications for the country under FMG. Why these tax rights occur in southwestern Nigeria, and how were they solved by the FMG? Could they be considered as national or nationalistic, social or socialist movements, which were spreading in Western countries in the mid-1960s? This paper aims to understand the context of the tax riots, and I will also thus cover the state of Nigeria from an economic and political and monetary perspective, and the importance of taxation in the state formation and equilibrium. I will analyze the start and the spread of the riots in southwestern Nigeria, and finally the impact of these riots in the knowledge of the Nigerian history and the work of Nigerian historians. And I will essentially try to fill up the knowledge gap of the Abeko-Yakoko formal uprising of 1968 and 1969 from an economic history perspective point of view. So I covered a bit of the theoretical framework. So I'm talking about Ray. Ray is one of the main theoreticians of the modern money theory, which states that to create money, money is created for taxation, via taxation. So basically, the extent of the literature of the monetary history of Nigeria. Oh, sorry. The Republic of Biafra decided on the early stage of its existence to create a solid financial infrastructure, the Bank of Biafra, a central bank, as a market maker, and its monetary and territorial independence, but to keep the Nigerian sterling as a legal tender. And also the other side of the story is there was an issue as well, because when we look at Ray, one of the most important power claimed by a sovereign government is the authority to levy and collect taxes and other payments made to government, including fees and fines. Tax obligations are levied in a national money of accounts. In most developed nations, it is the government own currency that is accepted in a payment of tax, because the government currency is the main thing accepted by the government in payment of tax and other monetary debt due to government. And to avoid penalties imposed for non-payment of taxes, including prison, the taxpayer needs to obtain the government currency. So based on this theory, tax drive money creation. So the issue of taxation during the Civil War. So as in the title, taxation remained a key issue during the Civil War, which represented substation capital and equipment expenditure. The other expenditures were represented by the operation of demonetization by the Federal Republic and abroad. If we look at the historiography, we understand that taxation protests were a regular occurrence during the 1920s in southern Nigeria, although these protests did not lead to the disappearance of taxation. Taxation is only a crucial factor for monetary creation, but also to support funding for key infrastructure in a modern state. However, this time was different, as the federal military government was facing more expenditure during the Civil War and to demonetize some of the banknotes to save off the Biafra. According to the report of the Accountant General 1968-1969, the receipt and payment account for the year ended March 1968 indicated that receipts were in a form of personal income tax, prunings, and sales by the government departments, rent on government property, revenues, etc. So I'm trying to speed up. But at the end of March 1968, the shortfall from the produce sales tax stood at over 525,000 Nigerian sterling. There were no explanation provided for this shortfall, but one prima facie explanation may be fight against the secessionist region, but harvest or the fall in global commodities price. However, Nigeria, like most former British colonies, had its currency, the Nigerian sterling, tied up to the sterling area agreement. And also in a speech, broadcast, Brigadier Adebayo stated that the province was under financial duress due to the civil war, with the decline of in economic activity, the reduction in foreign aid and investment, the loss of one region, and there were also immediate consequences about the difficulties to maintain the social and economic objective stated in a development plan of 1962-1968 on existing services. And then new tax increases were approved in April 1968, and Brigadier Adebayo encouraged women in his speech to pay taxes. Out of an estimated population of more than 9 million people, there were only 799,000 people on the tax roll, and actually it was insufficient to cover future expenditure and development projects in the region. And reading the Daily Times on the 4th of June 1968, there's an article called "The New Rise in Petrol Tax," showing that the federal Nigerian government was under financial constraints. And then in July 4th, 1968, the same newspaper published the personal income tax of Lagos, dated of 1961, to remind people to pay the income tax and the consequences if they do not abide. And actually, this notice had no material impact to the potential taxpayers, in spite of the broadcasting of the speech of Brigadier Adebayo the same year. And on the other hand, there were not sufficient funds to cover the daily operating expenses of the state. That's what I saw in when I read the annual report of the southern western region. Then looking at some other magazine and some other sources, we know that actually the reserve for the central bank reduced significantly during the year 1968-1969. And also there were some issues as well on the cocoa prices. And there was a devaluation in 1967, as everybody knows, the devaluation of the British sterling, which had a ripple effect as well for Nigeria as a whole. I'm just trying to jump. Sorry. Then talking about the spread of the tax rate itself in southwestern Nigeria, the spread of the tax rate occurred rapidly. Tax agitation were reported in November 1969, so that Chief Awolowo had to explain at an assembly in Ishara, attended by Obas, chief and representative of the people of Ijebu, Remo, that taxes had to be increased due to expenditure of the war. In November, there were reports of riots in Ibadan. On November 25th, 1968, protester against tax increase burned down the Ibadan Palace and the car of the traditional ruler of Ishara. In November on the 26th of November 1968, the army shot 2,000 demonstrators storming official offices for the same reason in Ibadan. This resulted to 11 deaths. Brigadier Adebayo didn't want to accept the riots and wanted to force protesters to stop the demonstrations and the riots. And as I explained earlier, those tax riots didn't come at a good time. And the Western region couldn't afford to keep the local economy at a standstill, as we can see as well in the appendix of this document, of this annual report. And later, the governor imposed a curfew in Ibadan, Ishara, Ede, and Abeokuta, which was suspended for a few days before Christmas. And also, there were also some complaints from other officials about the basically the State Commissioner for Finance complained about the unnecessary burden on existing payers, as only 800,000 people out of 2 million potential taxpayers. So just for say that raising taxes are important so that the state can function and redistribute excess of cash to the persons in more needs, and to invest in key state projects to keep the cohesion of the state. However, the new tax hike puts further Nigerian citizens under duress at a time where the state needed more financial resource from its exportation of soft commodities such as cocoa from the remaining region under the Federation by controlling foreign exchange reserve, thanks to the decree limiting importation of foreign goods. These riots threatened the cohesion of the state at the time of the civil war. And yeah. So I have more, my conclusion is longer, even the paper is very long. But I'm hoping to get some comments or questions as well. Because I wanted to add in this paper as well the component of VAT as well.
Thank you very much, Bamidele. Bamidele on tax riots in southwestern Nigeria, 1968 to involvement of Agbekoya, the Yoruba peasant group for tax, reduction during the regime of General Adenyemeka Adebayo, to ask questions and make some clarification. We can tease out of our paper what we can and history. Our final panelist is a PhD student in the Department of History at the University of Calgary. Bachelor and master's degree from University of Lagos, Department of History and Strategic Studies in 2014. And she's interested in criminal law, colonial criminal, Southern Nigeria. So I will yield the floor to Olandia Osondu.
Thank you.
Olandia, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Can you hear me, sir?
We can hear you clearly. Okay.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. The title of my paper, which is also a work in progress, is titled Once Our Prestige Goes, Our Past to Govern Goes With It. And I'm trying to explore the racial politics of corporal punishment in colonial southern Nigeria. So a little bit of a background. The law and the criminal justice system has been considered as a major part of the civilizing mission in colonial Nigeria. And there was a focus on the law as some researchers have studied the history of the criminal law and introduction of the law in general to Nigeria and its effects, its impact. And one of those researchers is Professor Moni Adewoye, who does a very good job in exploring the various phases of the introduction of the law into the country and the impact of the justice system in colonial Nigeria. With the various punishment systems introduced or continued in the country during the colonial period, the use of the cane or the whip was something that continued during the colonial period. And there had been various explanations on why the cane or flogging was continued. Some colonial officials explained it to be based on the fact that it was a system that had always existed in Nigeria, so the use of the cane had always been there. It was a sense of when people were flogged, there's this case of moral shame and it's a major deterrent. But some other people have also explained that as much as the use of as much as flogging was a system of punishment that existed in pre-colonial Nigeria, it had also existed in Britain prior to this period. And it's also been explained that it was important to keep on with this routine of punishing people through the use of the whip, because Africans in general, some researchers have highlighted that it was a wrong racial view that Africans had a very childlike behavior. And sending Africans to prison or sending Nigerians to prison wasn't a very good form of deterrence. Rather, when they are morally shamed or when they are flogged in public or in the prison system, it serves as a better form of deterrent. And so over time, during the colonial period, instead of various conversations about who should be flogged, the gender of the person, the age of the person, and what kind of instrument to be used when flogging an individual. And some scholars have actually paid like really good attention to this. For example, David Kinneray, in his article about the Road of the Empire, speaks about flogging in the military arena. And Stephen Pierce works on Northern Nigeria, writes a very good article, or he wrote a very good article about flogging of the female or women in Northern Nigeria and how that stirred up a scandal in 1914. But by the 1950s, you had specific crimes that individuals were involved in, and it could be, the corporal punishment could actually be awarded in this case. And this involved cases of sexual violence. I also researched on cases of rape and cases of domestic intimate violence. And you actually see case files where an individual is sentenced to prison, and also included in his sentence is the use of corporal punishment on this individual. And also in cases of felony, in cases of armed robbery or attempted armed robbery, and in cases of theft, an individual could actually be flogged for their involvement in this kind of crime. Now, by the 1950s, there was actually a maximum amount of strokes that could be used. And so that was like 12 strokes. It was focused on men. Women were not flogged by this period in time, which is a period of a study. And then there were also various instruments. But what is really important in this discussion, and what is actually the focus of this paper, is section 387 of the Criminal Procedure Ordinance, which in a case or a crime whereby an individual is sentenced to for a period of 6 months, if the court deemed it fit, the person, and because of the prevalence of crime in that jurisdiction, the individual could actually be flogged. So corporal punishment was allowed in such cases. But then this raised a couple of questions. So first and foremost, the question of judicial discretion, the kind of power the judge had. It also gave blanket authority to the courts. And so the judge could actually decide on what if flogging was allowed or if flogging should not be included in the punishment for this individual. And Africans at this point, you should also think about the period this was happening. This was the 1950s. There are also questions about the use of the cane, if it was repugnant to justice and morality. And there were also questions about the severity of the crime. So what crime actually can corporal punishment be used in? And more importantly, which is the focus of my paper, is the fact questions about the skin color of the offender. Was this law for just Africans, or was this law for also European officials in Nigeria? I would also like to mention the fact that over time, there were discussions, there were conversations about the importance of actually ending corporal punishment in Nigeria. And some of the works I talked about earlier actually focused on this. But there was always this conflicting opinion between what the ideas that existed in Britain and in various colonies and what was really practiced in Nigeria. So for 1919, which is not focused, well, I stumbled on this paper in a memorandum that was sent in the Calabar province that spoke about the flogging of women. And there were questions about why should women be flogged. And it raised up certain questions from individuals in the metropole and the colonial office. By 1920, there were also, it was also reported in the annual reports that flogging of female prisoners had ended in colonial Nigeria. By 1941, section 387, which is actually the focus of this paper, there was a decision to replace this section and only allow the use of corporal punishments on specific offenses. And this had to be authorized by the governor. But then when the 1945 Criminal Procedure Ordinance was published, it was not there. And so this change had not been made. And the archival material says for unknown reasons. So nobody knows why this was not actually implemented by 1945. Now by 1947, the Governor General promises that we're going to do this and we're going to make this change in the law by this period. And then in the 1950s, I also stumbled upon an article from actually a letter sent from the United Nations General Assembly asking that the use of corporal punishment had to be abolished in British mandated territories. And some parts of the Cameroon was administered by the British government in Nigeria. And so in a response to that letter, there were mentions about the fact that legislations will soon be put into place that would lead to the repeal of Section 387, that over time corporal punishments that was really allowed in native courts also will be restricted to only similar offenses in the higher courts. And over time, there was a gradual desire to actually abolish the use of corporal punishments in Eastern and Western provinces. But then by 1954, which is the core focus of this paper, this had not been done. And then the reason behind it was the fact that 1950s Nigeria was going towards independence. And so there were discussions about constitutional change. And there was also mentions about the fact that in local territories, there was not core alternative to actually flogging people. And so corporal punishment, if it was removed, would cause a kind of crisis or a kind of agitation among the local people. My paper focuses on this judge who is known as Justice Mason Bigho, and some people might probably have heard about him. He's popularly known as the dog bite magistrate. If you've read Professor Aderito's recent book, he was like really mentioned in part there. Now, there were two incidents that brought out this question of corporal punishment in southern Nigeria. And the first incident was a very popular one about Bigho's decision to actually sentence a white man to not just give him the option of a fine or imprisonment, but also sentence him to being flogged, to the use of corporal punishment. Now, this man was known as Alexander Gregory. He was a European pottery officer, and the victim, who was a trader in Ouagombe, and the judge was, like I mentioned earlier, Ms. Mbehu. Now, the incident happened in May 23rd, 1954. You had the Hausa trader who comes. It said that the wife of the owner of the house, that's the wife of Gregory, actually beckoned on him to come to sell stuff to them, to hire in the house. But then when he comes in, Bigho releases his dog on the man, and the man is beaten by the dog, not just beaten, but severely beaten, and he had to undergo some stitches. Now, Bigho is also accused, and he's charged under Section 355 of the Criminal Ordinance, and that's for unlawful assault of an individual, and also on Section 356 for resisting police arrest. He's found guilty of the crime, and then he's sentenced to either the fine of £120 or imprisonment for 12 months. And then Bigho also ensures that he's flogged. So in the sentence, it says 3 strokes of the cane. Now, Bigho decides to do this because he, in the court case, it said there that he wanted it to serve as a deterrent as a result of the prevalence of assault in the region. Over time, this sentence is actually appealed, and Mr. Alexander Gregory is not flogged. The sentence is quashed by Justice Jibowu, who the newspaper actually emphasizes is a Black African man, because Bigho was African and Bigho had made the sentence, and now another Black African man had checked out the case, the court file, and had decided that he shouldn't be flogged. Rather, he should, the fine will be reduced and the caning sentence will be taken out. Now, over time, this leads to a lot of press sensationalism there. Bigho, for instance, is labeled as a communist. Think about the period also. This is the 1950s. The Cold War is happening in the world. Bigho had lived in Europe for a while and had traveled across Europe. And so in some places, he was labeled as a communist. He also had this reporter who is known as John Redpen, who writes from the London Express. He comes to Nigeria to report about this case because of how big and impactful the case was. A Black judge actually sentencing a white man to prison, to corporal punishments. In various newspaper excerpts, I also was able to come across, you had people writing, or individuals speaking about the fact that they were actually shocked and surprised about the sentence. And then there's also this tendency to paint Gregory as somebody who is a good person, who has a very good record of working with Africans. And there's also this tendency tendency to also speak about his masculinity. For example, in the newspaper article that was republished in the Nigerian Daily Express, Bego is described, Mr. Gregory is described as a sturdy, ruggedly handsome man. So that typical idea of what a white official should actually look like. His wife is also described as being a brunette. And then more importantly is the fact that there are discussions about Africans actually being sad that a white man was actually being sentenced to being flogged by a Black judge. But on the other hand, you have a new group of Africans who were more educated, and not just only educated people, but individuals also speaking about the fact that the Black judge could actually sentence a white European official to prison to flogging was a big deal. And so Bego receives letters of admiration from India and from various British colonies. He also received a very important letter from an elderly man who had initially worked with Gregory in Calabar. And this man mentioned that Gregory had always assumed of himself as being a semi-god. And then the man also offered Bego his daughter in marriage if he wanted, just free of charge, just because of the fact that he could actually decide and sentence this man to flog him. There's also various newspaper reports that speak about the fact that bring out the question about why does corporal punishment still exist in Nigeria when it's not really practiced in various parts of various colonies. And there's this tendency to question the fact that it just shows that the law was actually put into place not just for the white people, not just for Black people. Actually, the law was put into place just for Black people. And Gregory's case has just proven that that was why this law was in existence. So you see Africans actually speaking about the importance of the case.
2 minutes to run to complete.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's a second incident, which is also very interesting, where you have a case of Bego. A second incident, Bego is sentencing 3 white men to prison. It's claimed that it said that this man stole a singlet, a bale of singlet. They engaged in, they sold it to an African, 2 Africans, and these Africans are caught by the police and sentenced or charged under section 430 of the criminal law. They are later found guilty of the crime, and then Bego sentenced them not just to imprisonment, but also sentenced them to flogging. Now you also receive, questions about the fact that why should a Black justice actually sentence white men to prison? And over time, there are questions not just from white people in Nigeria, but also white people in Britain speaking about the fact that these men should not be sentenced to prison. And then there's also the question about race, the question about the British prestige, that if a Black justice is allowed to actually send white people to flogging, there's going to be a problem, there's going to be a loss of prestige to the white European officials in Nigeria. So there are questions about the race issue coming up every time in newspaper articles. And finally, the governor decides to actually ask that there should be an intervention. And the reply from the Governor General or from the government in Nigeria is the fact that Bego has actually acted on the law. But the letter also mentions the importance of actually thinking about removing or abolishing corporal punishment in Nigeria. And there were also questions about Bego's ability to actually act as a judge, because, for example, this here talks about the fact that he's not a very sound lawyer. He doesn't have the gift of judicial detachment, which is very important for lawyers. Finally, you had Africans reacting to this also. And at the end of the day, these men who were supposed to be flogged for their actions were declared unfit by an African medical officer. So there's this emphasis on an African medical officer actually saying that they should not be flogged because of various sicknesses that it said they had. And so lastly, in conclusion, it brings up the question of how these 2 cases actually reflect the structure or the legal structure of the country at this point. And as an immediate aftermath of this incident is there's a revised in 1955, there are changes in the Eastern Criminal Amendment Order, whereby there's an abolition of whipping for offenders only for male juvenile offenders. And over time, so you could think about the questions of race, also think about the role of the press, both for Africans and for Europeans, and how this had affected the changing structure of the legal structure in Nigeria. And also think about the 1950s as an era of intense nationalism, an era of constitutional change, and how this, in one way or the other, impacted in the changes to the Nigerian law at this point in time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think you have second chance to. I can see that you have so much to say, but definitely you have follow-up questions to actually explain some of the, salient issues you've raised about beyond corporal punishment, about race and criminal justice system in the colonial period. I can see that we have attendees, we have other people on the platform. So the floor is actually open for questions and comments. I think, let me lead the charge rather. I would like to have a brief comment on Bamidele's presentation about this tax riot, and that was championed by the peasant farmer group Agbekoya. And I was wondering why you were making your presentation, that were these guys ideological, or were just are they not just reacting to a law that actually threatened their means of livelihood, their survival? That is number one. Secondly, I'm also thinking of, is there any connection between that riot and global economic realities at that point in time? That is not clear to me. I'm trying to see if there's any connection between the two. And secondly, why did Agbekoya went to Chief Awolowo to come and mediate? And what was Awolowo's reaction? Was he aware of keeping in touch with his base for possible political exploitation after the post-military era? Is there any connection between the two? That is my question for Bamidele. I don't know the format now. Maybe we should ask random question, then everybody will, respond to their own particular question. The first presentation is actually a very broad presentation. I don't know if the presenter is actually trying to see how we can begin to talk about business history or economic history. And I was wondering that there were good indigenous businesses that actually competed favorably with the European, firms in the colonial period, especially in the coastal area, Lagos, the Niger Delta, and the Bight of Benin. There were a lot of good indigenous businesses. And you also raised a question about why did some of these businesses collapsed in the post-colonial period. And I'm throwing back the question to you. Why did they collapse? If you think colonial policies and programs were responsible for business collapse during the colonial period, then why did they collapse in the post-colonial period, as you've rightly pointed out? For now, I think I should also allow other people to ask questions. I can see somebody raising up a hand. Mufutiat.
Dr. Jimo, can you please repeat your first question, please?
Pardon?
Can you please repeat your first question?
And my question was, I'm asking if the rioters were ideological, or they were merely responding, or they merely responded to events, policies that threaten their means of livelihood.
Thanks.
Okay. Maybe we should also take questions from Muftiat, or Muftiat, pardon my pronunciation, please. You can unmute yourself and ask your question, Muftiat. Hello, Muftiat, you are listening?
Maybe sorry, Prof. I was unable to unmute myself for a very long time. I'm sorry, no. That was actually a mistake. I don't have a question. I just wanted to comment, but I already wrote it in the chat section. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you can respond while we wait for some attendees to ask questions. I can see somebody.
Shall I answer the questions?
Yes, yes.
So basically, I came across a lot of papers covering the tax riots from a Marxist point of view, but I'm not a Marxist and I'm not interested into that. I think the the orientation of my paper was more from the situation of the government rather than the situation on the ground. But my view is people were reacting to the world event. They were not react. I don't think they had the ideological purpose. I think it's more what happened during in the daily life of the citizens. Because I have some oral history in my family. So basically during the Civil War, the situation was very difficult, economically, extremely difficult. So I don't think people had in mind being a Marxist or being driven by a next Marxist-Leninist view. It was more about how can I survive because of the situation. But because of what you say about to world economy, I think there's a connection, but that's something I need to code. First, I'm getting better in Python. So that's where, from Python, I would be able to infer some data insights. But I think there's a relationship as well with what happened in Britain, because as you know, I tried to explain it very quickly about 1967. That's when the British sterling devalued and the Nigerian sterling was pegged to the Nigerian sterling. So therefore, it had a very negative impact on the Nigerian economy because everything was more expensive as well, and for the local population. That's why there was some exchange control law being put in place. And okay. And then for the ability to negotiate with Awolowo through this, I don't know, but that's something I can investigate. Because as I said, actually, my paper is more oriented from the point of view of the government and from the point of view of money creation, because I'm a monetary specialist.
Okay.
And I wanted to make a comment to Lukman about his paper. And I agree with you that there are many companies, there were many companies during the colonial time, but you can look at in the 1950s as well, there were a local indigenous bank which collapsed. And that's maybe it could help him to find out what happened. I can't go into the details, but there was also the economic situation.
Yeah, Lukman, Adeni, something to say.
And there's some archives in Ibadan on that as well, on local small businesses.
I think for Lukman, I think you can also, aside from I don't know if you have access to Kew Garden, because I've actually done some works on the British commercial interests in Nigeria during the transfer of power. Published article after the presentation, I can get you a copy of that article, how the colonial government actually tried to safeguard their commercial interests during the transfer of power, during the transition period. Of course, some of indigenous businesses were adversely affected because of this decolonization. At the same time, it also helped to establish a lot of Nigerians as a leading industrialist, because the British commercial, the British businessmen actually looked for Nigerian representatives who will help, to foster their economic interest after the transfer of power, because they emphasize a kind of government response, policy response that will protect and promote indigenous businesses. So you might also be looking at that, Lukman. Please unmute yourself. We can't hear you, Lukman.
Now, thank you so much for the comment. Before I proceed on answering the questions, as regards my presentation. So I think I want Mrs. Bamidele Ali also to try to tell us the relationship between the civil war, which was ongoing by the time of this incident of taxation. So what it was the connection between the two? Was it that the government of the time was trying to raise, money to finance the war, to support the war effort or something of vision as regards that? All businesses, indigenous businesses were unable to survive subsequently after the transfer of power. Actually, during the colonial time, some of the businesses that actually, indigenous businesses that actually survived, they were working in collaboration with the British companies, and they were assisting colonial government in fostering their economic advance in Nigeria during that time. So it was actually helping the colonial economic activities. So in the post-colonial time, I think the successive government, they lost their focus. I think the successive government after the colonial time, they were only working on enriching themselves rather than working for the development of the state at large. So, because if actually, like it has been pointed out here, that some of the indigenous businesses were actually able to survive or compete favorably with the colonial during colonial businesses and during the dispensation. So why is it that after the dispensation, when the colonial was no longer here, when the colonial government when there was already transfer of power, why is it that these industrialists failed or could not survive again? Because if there should be a kind of continuity in their activities, why was it that the successive after the transfer of power, they were unable to survive? So and I can tell you that their inability to survive has not been subjected to as an critical study, because the activities of this indigenous business could have supported the growth and development of the state after the transfer of power. But there must be a kind of something is missing as regards to why they folded up after the transfer of power, and that is as an is stuck on. Like I told you, it is a kind of work in progress. In fact, the paper is half written, and like I said earlier on, I should not be the one presenting the paper, because the paper appears to be like a business whatever. The other co-author.
Sorry, I think
Yes,
you can actually sort that out with your partner. But I just want to make a quick intervention.
Okay, sir.
Why the business collapsed after the post-colonial, the colonial period? That is what we want to learn from you. I mean, you are the researcher, so maybe next year or in any other forum, we can actually come up to tell us why business collapsed after the colonial period.
Thank you,
I want
sir.
to go to Yolanda now. Yolanda, thank you for your paper. Presentation actually explained, if I get it right, the fact that beyond the justice system, embedded in colonial justice system, is a question of race and class. Because when you look at the judgment by that judge and the reaction of the colonial government and the metropolitan press to the judgment, then you begin to see the question of how race actually shaped the implementation of justice system, in spite of the fact that we have Africans on the bench and the bar. And yet, when judgment was delivered, the interpretation of that judgment, clearly show a system that is meant for Africa, definitely not for Europeans. I think it's a wonderful thing that we are now seeing beyond what we've known before, building on what Adewoye have done, on how we can use criminal justice system to actually, interrogate the question of race and class during the colonial period. I think that is my takeaway from your paper.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of things to say, and I just realized how I thought 50 minutes was a big time, and I just realized how really small 50 minutes it actually is. So thank you very much. And yeah, it just raised a lot of questions, because my dissertation generally focuses on women and the criminal justice system. But then I stumbled on this paper when I was out on research in the archives in London, and it just struck me like something I really like to further interrogate. So like I said, it's still a work in progress, and yes, I'll still look into it. But thank you for your point.
Thank you. Thank you. I can see Kausara Okpeyemi is with us, your co-presenter, Mr. Lukman. Maybe she wants to chip in one or two comments.
I don't know if she wants to do that. She's free to. She's free. I think since it's a kind of a joint work, she's free to chip in anything.
Okay. Now there is a question for Ms. Bamidele, and the question is: can one really discuss the tax riot in Western Nigeria without foregrounding it in the earlier political crisis in the area before 1968?
I think we can, and I think we cannot as well. So I think it's possible, because I just basically I did a dissertation a few years ago, MPhil, focusing on the monetary transitions in Nigeria from 1957 to 1974. And that's why I came across some archives, rare archives actually, about the context, money creation, what happened. So, and I think for me, my basis is money creation, and what happened, and what are the monetary costs for all parties. And then and also a few years ago, I read Heart for Yellow Sun, and I mentioned that to my mother. That's why she started talking to me about the experience in Nigeria when she grew up there during the Civil War. But it's more economically, not politically, because I think most people didn't care about politics. It was about, and also I would say in Southwestern Nigeria, people didn't care what the central government was doing. They were only caring about what's happening in their daily life. And I think it's still the case these days.
Well, I think follow up to that question. If you look at the politics of Southwestern Nigeria, the coming of the military, and of course the involvement of Chief Adebayo, given the political disposition of Chief Adebayo to the Action Group, party and its leadership, there might be some connection between how they reacted and a kind of political undertone to that reactions. Because you want to ask question, I understand that there were some differences between Chief Awolowo and Chief Adebayo, Colonel Adebayo rather. So you cannot totally...
Excuse me? Hello? 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 I can't hear you. I couldn't hear what you said at the end.
Pardon?
I couldn't hear your arguments towards the end. because it cut.
Yeah, well, my point is just a follow-up to, I think, Yolanda's comment that there seems to be a connection between previous political happenings in southwestern Nigeria and the patterns of that spontaneous reaction to tax riots. Even if you look at the relationship between Colonel Adebayo and Chief Awolowo, and why, and the intervention of Awolowo, when you sum up everything together, because if you are talking about tax imposed on farmers and politics of southwestern Nigeria at that particular period in time, there's a serious connection between the two. Because the pool, the financial pool of Action Group actually comes from the taxation of peasant farmers. And they were the foot soldiers of Action Group. So I think it's very thin line.
Hello? Hello? I think you were cut again. You were saying it's a thin line.
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
No, we couldn't hear you anymore because it cut when you were saying it's a thin line and then it cut.
Yes, I said it's a thin line. It's a thin line that, if properly explored, can actually, illuminate our understanding of that riot beyond what we know.
Okay.
Yeah,
I will take it on board.
Yeah. Osondu, you want to say something? Yes, you can.
Yeah, I want to say something. This, if one looks at the work of Professor Remi Anifowoshe.
Okay. Can you speak slowly, Remi
Anifowoshe.
Adefowoshe.
No, Anifowoshe, Remi, Professor
Anifowoshe.
Foyoshe, okay.
Violence and Politics in Nigeria, the Tiv and Yoruba Experience.
Violence and Politics in Nigeria?
Yeah, the Tiv and Yoruba Experience.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a book that actually discussed the violence and political crisis in Yoruba area, Western Nigeria and Tiv land.
Okay.
But the point is that the political crisis in the western part of Nigeria created a kind of condition, a kind of disaffection among people, including farmers, known as the Agbekoyas. And that disaffection was there even before the military intervention. And the military intervention did not take away the disaffection or that terrible feeling the farmers had about the government. So one cannot see the tax per se as the cause of the violence at that time, especially during that period of 1968, when the farmers were in protest about the tax. It is like a build-up. It is like a volcano smoldering. And if you go through the works of Professor Remi Anifowoshe, you can see that the situation was smoldering like a volcano. It only erupted during that crisis of the tax. That is my view or my contribution towards that. If you go through the work of Professor Remi Anifowoshe, it will go a long way to help you foreground your work.
Okay.
And don't see the tax thing in isolation from the political crisis before that time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Because I just took a monetary angle actually by the purpose of taxation, why it was important during that time.
That's fine. Thank you.
But thank you very much.
All right.
Okay. I think I would like to thank everybody for this wonderful session. Want to thank Yolanda Osundu, who presented on the criminal justice system, and of course, Bamidele, the Agbekoya. Well, I think they were still very much alive. We might want to call on you to come and provide some technical support for the resuscitation of Agbekoya. So, or you'll be an honorary member. And I'd like to thank Lukman Adeniyi and Kausara. I think you will do well by reshaping the focus of your work. And it's a good thing that you are coming up with a new team, business history. Let's see what happened to our businesses in the past. And probably there's something we can learn from how Nigerian businesses are now relocating to Ghana and some other, countries in West Africa. Maybe we can see some connection if actually we can learn from history. I would like to thank everybody. This is a wonderful session from me here in Ibadan. I want to say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Bamidele, for the suggestions. I appreciate it. I'll search for the individual.
And but unfortunately, I have a palm wine here. There is no way I can port it to you.
I don't drink alcohol. Sorry.
Yolanda, this is palm wine, not alcohol.
You're making us meet Nigeria.
Next time I'm in Ibadan, so I will bring.
Excuse me, I would like to have the details of Yolanda because I am working presently, personally, on my PhD. I'm working on robbery and criminal homicide in southwestern Nigeria, and I'm actually thinking of, applying to University of Calgary. If there is anything you can do for me in that regard.
Okay, so my email address is I don't know what specifically I can do for you, but then if you want to reach out to me, that's very fine. My email address is my first name, Yolanda, my last name, at ucalgary.ca, at ucalgary.ca. So you can, and I'm on LinkedIn.
I think you can actually get it from the mail sent to you by LSA. Everybody
I will do that.
So we can pick it up.
Yeah, that's fine. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime you want.
Yolanda, there's a PhD thesis at the University of Lagos by late Paul Oshifodunrin.
Oh yeah, he was my professor.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he was
of blessed memory. He was my teacher at during my first degree in Agowe. Fantastic human being.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Professor Jima, I have another question. You were talking about the paper that you wanted to send to Mr. Adeniyi. Could you please send it to me as well?
Yes, I will try to get it across to you. It's a paper published by late Lawal, the British commercial interest during the transfer of power.
Thank you so much. I'll be expecting it, sir.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
All right.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Please, there's a question in the chat box, and since we have some time on our hands, I believe we can still take it.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Maybe.
The question, is it the question you referred to? I made a comment, or I kind of made a direct comment, so sorry about that. I thought I was replying to you directly. You asked a question about the geographic location. Definitely, both occurrences occurred in Lagos. Definitely Lagos as the seat of government, the center where a lot of political things were happening at that point. I feel like it played a strong role in the way the situation turned out to be. So yes, I'm not saying that if it happened in Eastern Nigeria, it might not have been as widespread as it was. But, the fact that it occurred in Lagos was also a very important factor.
Okay, somebody's dog is barking and is telling us it's time to go. So, good night, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.